Clam prop! Hey guys, it's Spence from Video Spence, and I'm glad to have you back. Today we're going to cover the basics of the editing window for videos. Now this is something that I introduced you to on our first video, but I really didn't give you a lot of details. Today I want to specifically show you how to take a video, let's say a sample from YouTube, or even your own video from your camera, put it into the timeline, and start using the basic tools in order to slice it and dice it and to make it into something pretty useful. Later we'll go through the steps of how to perfect the transitions, how to add audio, and even how to do things like special effects, such as titles and other kind of background drops. So let's start with the basics. I actually am going to borrow one of Henry's videos here from YouTube, and I've talked to you about this before. You simply can find something that you like, and if it's in the public domain, you can't just use it for your own purposes and call it your own. But for learning, you can definitely borrow somebody's interesting video in order to get some high quality footage, and you're just playing locally. If you ever wanted to repost it, it's really important that you give somebody the necessary attribution after first asking or checking the license to see if you're allowed to do so. In our case, we're just playing with fair use, plus Henry's a great participating contributor to our site, so I'm sure that he won't mind me using his great video here. So I've used the downloader that I've talked about before. Just type download YouTube videos and you'll find any number of them. I used Y2Mate today. All you do is just grab the URL from here, paste it into here, and you're done. In our case, because this was a 4K video, it actually gave me the option to get a 1080p file, which I'm going to do here. For most of you, a 720p would be fine. Remember, that's a resolution that's typical of normal HD, whereas some can do now a higher resolution of 1080p, or even higher, something called 4K. Let's go over to our HitFilm Express so I can talk to you about what we're going to do with this clip. So in HitFilm Express Editor, I'm going to start a new project file. And remember, we've always talked before, we're going to stay in 1080p. But in this case, I'm actually going to start with a clip that's 1080p. And I'm going to use the editing window. So I'm going to start with the editing. The first thing we do once we're in here is we're going to go ahead and import this particular clip. Now, if you've brought this in from your GoPro or your other video camera, it's the same idea, but you'll first use the step of connecting your computer to the camera and offloading the video from the camera. Many of you will be doing that via something like this, which is either a full SD card or a micro SD card that either plugs into your laptop or uses a little adapter. Whichever way you do it, with either cable or an SD card adapter, or in some cases even wirelessly, you'll have this type of file on your computer. So we're going to import media. Once we do, I'm going to look over to my downloads area, and this is the clip that I just took from YouTube with the downloader. It takes a second to go in because this is about 90 megabytes. My computer's reasonably fast, but it's by no means a new machine. So most any kind of a modern computer is going to work just fine. Now let's talk about the areas that we're going to work with today. I did, by the way, cover these in somewhat detail in one of the earlier videos, so be sure to go back to the YouTube library for this account and check out that earlier video. But right here is basically our main viewer. Now, one of the things that I want to tell you is there's also a different view that we can use that's going to be useful when we're video editing. And to get to that, I want to go over here to change my workspace. And you'll notice that there's some pre-made workspaces. Some of them are specialized to give you the tools you want up front. Whenever I'm editing, I choose the editing one, and this changes the layout slightly to something that has two window panels at the top. The first one is my clip inspection or trimmer, and the second one is for my viewer of what's going on in the actual timeline below. So the first step is for me to take this clip and I drag with my left mouse and I put it into the trimmer. And in doing so, I'll be able to actually edit this and see where the start and the end points are. Okay, so to do that, I simply take the video, grab it with my left mouse, and move it over to here. Use the video. Now sometimes what you have to do is actually move the scrubber. Even though this looks like there's nothing there, it's there. It's just that the first frame is dark because it starts with a fade in. So when I move this little timeline, this is called my scrubber, I can actually see what's there. Now the reason to do this is because you oftentimes don't want to work with the entire film that you just imported. It could be 30 minutes or an hour. Even in our case with a sample, it's 13 minutes and 4 seconds. So we want to select a small section. To do that, I'm going to use what's called the in and the out points. The in and the out points are these two controls here. Set the in point, set the out point. And what we're doing is just saying what little slice do we want to work with in our editor. I'll pick a random area just by moving this scrubber to some spot and selecting in point. And then I will move it to the right a little bit. What I want you to look at is this number here. This is going to give you the relative length of the entire clip. And over here, this is going to give us the number where we're at in the clip. And that's in terms of hours, minutes, seconds, and fractions of a second. So when I drag it over, watch that number change. You see, 21, 23, 25, 26. I can gauge how much actual footage I'm going for by how many seconds I've taken. So here I'm just going to take a few seconds, and I'm going to click the next button, which is set the out point. Now all I need to do is to grab that section and pull it down to my editor window. In order to do that, I'm going to click on the video itself and just drag it down. And you'll notice that it dragged it into video 2. If I kept going into the middle, I would just use the original video 1 track. One of the things to know is that when we're using the timeline editor, we can have multiple video tracks, as I'm going to show you in a second, as well as their corresponding audio tracks. Those are tied together. They're locked together initially. But if we want to, we can actually separate them and then make it possible to have a library of clips that are just video only and other clips that are just audio to mix and match. You don't have to keep them married together. Now what happens is in the timeline, I can use the zoom in and zoom out tool here to see that little clip in more detail by moving it to zoom in, and I move it to the left and I can zoom out. I usually like to work with it kind of filling up the timeline screen that I'm on so I can see a couple things. First of all, the thumbnails of what's actually in that particular clip, and then also the waveform of what the sound is like. And that's useful in the case that I may be trying to find the point where there's a pause in the sound. Maybe I want to edit right there, as I'm going to show you in another video when I teach you how to actually make awesome music style videos. So in this case, now that I've got it in the timeline, I can also grab the scrubber tool for the timeline, I should say the timeline editor, and move it manually back and forth. I can also use some keyboard shortcuts. The 3-finger salute, J, K, and L. J is scrub fast backwards, L is scrub right, and K is to stop in the middle. So it's kind of funny when you hear the sound, but that's like really super fast. And you can click also by using the keys individually just to start and stop it. Likewise, another shortcut is the space bar on your keyboard. Spacebar is equivalent to the play button, start and stop. So I can actually just put the timeline marker where I want it, and I could hit the spacebar. I hit it again, it stops. You'll notice on the right-hand side that we see the audio meters to indicate how loud the volume is. One of the things I want to tell you about is in this clip, I could adjust the sound either by lowering the volume globally, or I can actually slice and dice each clip and adjust each one on its own. I can also use the on-off switch for the speaker so that when I play it, I have no sound at all. And that's actually the choice I'm going to suggest that you make when you're editing. When you're doing the video only, you can leave the actual background sound associated with the video, but just turn off the audio so that you don't make yourself crazy with all the blah, 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 blah kind of sounds. All right, now I have a clip. I can see in the right-hand window what's happening. Let's talk about some basic editing. There's other details I'm going to go into in another video, but just imagine that you have multiple tools in your kitchen. You have a knife, you have a scissors, you have a spoon, you have a spatula. Well, we have those kind of tools here, and they're on the left-hand side of the editor. The arrow is what you can basically use for all-purpose pointing and dragging. That's what I use to move the scrubber. That's what I can use to grab a video and move it up or down into a separate track. Simple enough, right? The hand, if you will, the drag tool can be used as well, but it's used for more specific purposes inside of effects, but it also moves things left and right along the timeline. So for example, notice how now I'm not moving the clip, I'm actually moving the whole timeline. That means that if I have a really long production and I still want to make the images big enough to see in the thumbnail, I could just slide the whole thing down. You'll notice that I can also move the size of the video and the audio tracks so that if I want to compact them, I can. That's very handy. Next tool is the razor blade. This is what we're going to use as a basic tool, and it's kind of the original old-fashioned tool. This is the thing, like in the old days when they used to have film, that you'd see somebody with, a razor blade and take the piece of film out, and it ended up on the cutting room floor. Well, that's what they meant by it. They cut out the section, they threw it away, and they spliced the pieces together. I'm going to show you to use this tool as your basic starting point because it's really easy to use and you can't screw things up. You're just going to slice where you want, and then you're going to take the pieces and move them around. In the future videos, I'm going to show you how to use what's called the slip tool. This allows you to, in one step, not only slice something, but also slip a piece of film into the middle of something else. I said film, but I mean video. And to do some other tricks. Likewise, we have a slide tool, a ripple editing tool. Just to give you an idea, that's not ripple like the liquor. That's ripple as in, what if I wanted to put something in the middle, but not actually overlap what was there? Well, ripple editing means that you can effectively ripple, like dropping a stone in the water, and push everything away from what you dropped in. And then we have some other specialized tool like a roll edit, and then we have a rate stretching tool, which is a speed item. That's going to come in very handy when we're doing music videos, but way beyond this lesson. Okay, let's do some basic cuts, and I'll show you how this works. Let's imagine that we have this particular clip, and I want to make some cuts in order to make a transition. If you use your imagination, pretend that you have, let's say, an hour of video here, and we've taken it into the trimmer, we've taken out the best pieces, and let's pretend we've got 3 or 4 pieces. So to do that, I'm going to just take my razor tool, and all I have to do is clip, 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 clip. All right, so now I actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clips instead of 1. First of all, the basics of deleting are simple. Now that I'm using just the cutting and removal, I'm not going to use the specialty tool that I just talked about, which is the roll or slip editor, but I'm going to just click on the, let's say, piece that I don't want. All I need to do to get rid of it is to hit the delete key. Voila, it's gone. You'll notice the problem is now I've got this space to deal with. Well, you're getting a preview of why those specialty tools are useful. When I'm using these specialty tools, I don't have to bring the other clip manually over to fill the space. Instead, when I make that edit, it just knows what to do. Very time saving. However, in this case, all you're going to do is just cut the piece out or the pieces out and drag the other pieces over until you see those little arrows line up. Notice that tells you that you've made the connection. If you're unsure, you can always zoom in and really look closely. Now, here's a personal choice that you can use for yourself. When I'm editing a simple movie, I oftentimes make these what I'll call butt joint editing clips. In other words, clip A, clip B, they just touch together, like you see here. Sometimes I find in a longer production, it's easier to put the edits on separate timelines or separate tracks of the timeline because it gives me a visual clue of what is happening, that there's a transition. To do that, all I need to do is select the clip that I want to put on, let's say, video track 2, and I just move it up. And when I do, you'll see that now we've got a scenario where the clip A is here, and clip B is here, and then clip C is here, and then let's do the same for clip D. This actually gives me the ability to see that, well, we're doing some things that are transitioning. Okay, now I've shown you those basics. Let's go back and start over. Just repeat the steps real quick. So we're going to take the actual snippet that we've made here. We're going to drag it down into our timeline. And again, we can select video track 1 and audio track 1, or we can move it up. We then use our razor blade tool. We can just slice and dice it wherever we want into pieces. And then we can use the pointer tool to, again, drag, let's say, the A and B to different tracks to give us a visual sense of where we are in the edits. Now, once we're done, we can go ahead and look at our work over here. And I'm going to turn off the audio again. We can see the clips are all sequential. Let's mix it up a little bit by deleting a clip, as I showed. And let's move the D clip forward. So things will be a little out of order here. And let's also use our razor tool to move the timeline where we want and slice and dice it. And now you don't need to actually have the scrubber on the place, but that's just a way to line up. I use it like a ruler in the basic editing. You notice when I roll my mouse over that it highlights in red, so I know specifically that I'm on the right spot. Then I delete the piece. Now, one of the other tricks you can learn in this basic video is if you use the right or left-hand side, you can see that little bracket. It looks like one of those ellipse brackets that you'll do when typing. I can use that and hold my left mouse button down, and I can then drag the edge of the clip to make it shorter or to actually make it longer if it comes from a longer clip. And that's a super handy tool how to do it in place, where you can just tweak the size of the piece that you want to squeeze in. And let's move this other piece to the end to also give it kind of a different feel. Now let's look at our work. We can see those are just jump cuts, but you get the basic idea. Now if I have any space left over, I can also just select all the pieces and move them. Now these tools are very rudimentary, but the idea is I want you to have baby steps, just one or two things to try. Later I'm going to show you how you can do things like removing large gaps, making the transitions, making the pieces all line up with just snapping into place. That's the fun of learning this way. We can play, learn, and improve. Now that we've made some basic edits, let's export it so we can share it on YouTube or review our work. For that, we're going to actually use the Export tab. That's in the top right corner of the timeline, and we can either choose a segment of the timeline, just like we did with the trimmer, with an in and an out point, or we can choose the whole timeline and export the entire project. That's what I'm going to do here. Next, it puts it inside of our export window, and we can choose here which preset for the output. And that means what's the resolution, what's the file size, and so forth. Here, if we're going to use it on YouTube, let's just choose YouTube 1080p HD. There will be a video in the future where I'll show you how to change these presets for custom usage, but for now, let's go with that. Now all I need to do is click the Start Export button at the bottom, and it will begin to render the project. Since this is a pretty small project, it's not going to take more than a couple seconds. When it's done, it'll let me know, and then I can review the video file. That beep sound means it's done. So I can do it just like I did before. I can click on the output file here, and it will pop up so that I can review what this looks like. And here's my finished work. Obviously, this is just a sample, but it's just this simple. I hope that you're inspired to start doing this kind of video editing for yourself and follow along with the rest of my video Spence training. I'll see you on the next video.
Clamp prop!